It happened so fast that at first no one noticed. The film set had been buzzing all afternoon, full of laughter, bright lights, and quick conversations. The crew had just wrapped a long and exhausting day, and someone suggested taking a group photo before everyone left. People gathered together near the backdrop, their faces glowing under the soft lights, still wearing the joy and relief that came after a hard day's work. Ana de Armas was there too, but she stood a little to the side, her hands folded in front of her. She had been smiling earlier, talking with the costume team and a few makeup artists, but when the call for the group photo came, she hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't want to be in it. She loved moments like these. But the crowd moved so quickly that by the time she stepped forward, the space in the middle was already filled. People bunched together, arms over shoulders, laughter echoing. Ana found herself pressed toward the edge, half visible, as if she had simply wandered into the picture by accident. No one seemed to notice. No one except one person. Keanu Reeves was standing at the other end of the group, smiling faintly as the photographer adjusted the lens. But his eyes weren't on the camera. They were on Ana. He noticed the way her smile had shifted, just slightly. Most people would have missed it. It was small, almost hidden. But Keanu had always been the kind of person who paid attention to the quiet details. The photographer raised his hand. "All right, ready, everyone?" Voices rose in agreement. People leaned in closer. Ana stayed where she was, trying not to feel that familiar ache in her chest. It wasn't jealousy, not really. It was that sense of being overlooked, of fading into the background even when you were standing right there. It had happened before, and she had learned to swallow it, to tell herself it didn't matter. But Keanu's gaze lingered. Just before the shutter clicked, he spoke. "Wait." The word was soft but firm, and the laughter around them stilled. The photographer lowered the camera, looking confused. A few people turned toward Keanu. He smiled, not hurried, not nervous. "We're missing something," he said simply, his voice calm but carrying enough weight that no one interrupted. Then he took a slow step to the side, weaving through the people until he reached Ana. Her eyes widened slightly, unsure what he was doing. "Come on," he said quietly to her, his hand extending just enough to guide her. It wasn't a big gesture, not dramatic or showy, but there was something steady about it, something that told her he meant every bit of it. He led her through the crowd, people parting without a word. The middle of the group shifted, making room, and before she could say anything, he placed her right in the center. "There," he said with a small nod, his hand gently resting for a moment on her shoulder. The photographer smiled now, adjusting the frame. "All right, let's try that again." This time, when the camera clicked, Ana's smile was different. It wasn't the polite, practiced smile she had worn before. It was warm, real, touched by something deeper. And Keanu, standing beside her, didn't look at the camera at all. He looked at her. No one else might have understood what had just happened, but to Ana, it meant everything. In that single moment, he had told her without words, "You belong here. You matter. You are seen." She didn't know yet that this small moment would stay with her for a long time, that it would lead to a quiet conversation later, one that would reveal more about Keanu's heart than she could have imagined. But for now, she just stood in the middle, her smile unshaken, and the echo of his kindness settling into her chest like something she could carry forever. And somewhere behind the quiet click of the camera, a story had begun that no one on that set would forget. The day after the photo, Ana couldn't stop replaying it in her mind. It wasn't that the moment had been big or loud. If anything, it had been small and quiet. But it had carried a weight she couldn't quite explain. She thought about the way Keanu's voice had cut through the chatter, the way he had moved without hesitation, and the way his hand had rested gently on her shoulder like it belonged there. On set the next morning, the air felt different. The crew was busy again, running cables, setting up lights, adjusting props. Yet a few people looked at Ana a little longer than usual, like they were seeing her in a new way. She wasn't sure if she was imagining it, but she felt steadier. Keanu arrived later, walking with his usual calm, wearing that same dark jacket he seemed to live in. He didn't make a big entrance, didn't call out to anyone. He just moved through the set with quiet ease, nodding to people, offering small smiles. When he reached Ana, he paused. "Morning," he said softly. She smiled back. "Morning." There was a pause, comfortable, not awkward. "I wasn't sure you'd be okay with me pulling you into the middle yesterday," he said, looking at her as if the answer mattered more than anything else. "I was more than okay with it," she said, her voice low but firm. "Thank you." He gave a small nod, but she could see something in his eyes, like he was remembering something far away. Later, during a short break, Ana found herself sitting outside near the trailers. The afternoon sun was warm and the air carried the faint hum of distant traffic. She was sipping coffee when Keanu appeared again, holding his own cup. He didn't ask if he could join her. He just sat down, leaving enough space to be respectful, but close enough that she could feel the quiet between them. "You know," he said after a while, "sometimes people get left out without anyone meaning to. It just happens. The group shifts, the moment moves, and someone ends up on the edge. I've been there more than once." She tilted her head, surprised. "You?" "Sure," he said with a small shrug. "Fame doesn't keep you from feeling invisible sometimes. People think it does, but it doesn't." His words sank into her like stones dropped into water, sending ripples through her thoughts. She had never imagined him feeling that way. Keanu Reeves, who seemed to belong everywhere, who carried himself like someone who could never be overlooked. "Yesterday," he continued, "I just didn't want you to feel that way. Not on my watch." Ana didn't know what to say. There was something about his honesty that caught her off guard. She wanted to tell him how much it had meant, but the words felt too small. So instead, she simply said, "You didn't have to notice, but you did." He gave her a faint smile. "I try to notice." As the day went on, Ana found herself watching Keanu in a new way. He never sought the spotlight on set, yet people seemed drawn to him. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, people listened. He carried himself like someone who had nothing to prove and yet had already proved everything. What Ana didn't know was that there was more to his gesture than kindness. There was a reason he had noticed her at the edge, a reason he had moved so quickly without thinking. And that reason was a memory he had never shared with anyone on this set. A memory of the day he had been the one pushed to the edge, the one almost forgotten. The memory came back to Keanu as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. It had been years ago, early in his career, before his name was something people recognized. He had been on a set much smaller than this one, standing among a crowd of actors and crew as they prepared for a cast photo. He remembered how excited he'd been. It was his first big project, the kind where he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was finally stepping into the place he'd worked so hard to reach. Everyone had been buzzing with energy, calling out to each other, jostling for spots. And somehow, without meaning to, they had closed the space in the middle. He had ended up near the edge. He had smiled anyway, telling himself it didn't matter, but he could still remember the sting in his chest when the photo came out weeks later and his face was barely visible, half cut off, swallowed by the shadow at the side of the frame. No one had done it to hurt him, but the message had been the same. You are not yet one of us. That day had stayed with him. It wasn't just about being left out of a picture, it was about how easy it was for people to overlook someone, even without noticing. And how much it could mean when someone chose to see you instead. On the current set, the afternoon was wearing on. Ana was rehearsing a scene, and Keanu was sitting just behind the monitor with the director, watching her work. She moved with quiet precision, her expressions layered, her presence magnetic. But as the scene ended, he saw the small flicker in her eyes, the way she looked around, almost checking if anyone had really seen her effort. It was subtle, but he knew it well. When the director called for a short reset, Keanu stood and walked toward her. "That was good," he said simply. She looked at him, almost startled. "Really?" He nodded. "Yeah. And not just good. Honest. There's a difference." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Most people don't notice the difference." "Maybe not," he said. "But the right people do." She studied him for a moment, as if weighing whether to ask the question lingering in her mind. Finally, she spoke. "Yesterday, you didn't just move me into the middle for the photo, did you? It felt like more than that." Keanu didn't look away. Maybe it was. He didn't explain yet. He just let the quiet hold the truth between them. That night, the cast and crew gathered for a small dinner at a restaurant near the studio. The mood was light, full of laughter and music, but Keanu noticed that once again Ana had found herself a little off to the side. Not because people were pushing her away, but because she didn't seem to push herself forward. When dessert came, a few people left early, and Keanu saw his chance. He slid into the seat across from her. "Do you know why I noticed yesterday?" he asked, his voice low so no one else could hear. She shook her head. "Because once, I was you. I was standing in the edge of a group, smiling so no one could see it hurt, and nobody moved. Nobody said a thing." Anna's eyes softened. "And you remembered?" "Every detail," he said. "And I decided that day, if I ever saw it happen to someone else, I wouldn't just stand there." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she said, "I think you don't know how much that means." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I know how much it would have meant to me back then." They sat there for a while longer, the noise of the room fading around them. Keanu didn't realize it yet, but this was the start of a quiet bond, one built not on fame or work, but on something deeper. The next morning, the weather shifted. Clouds hung low over the set, and the usual bright energy was quieter, as if the whole crew felt the weight of the sky. The schedule was heavy, multiple intense scenes back to back, and the air carried that quiet tension that came when everyone knew they had to deliver. Ana arrived early, hair pulled back, script in hand. She walked through her lines softly, almost whispering to herself. Keanu noticed her from across the lot, standing alone near a stack of set props. She was reading the words, but her face told him she wasn't really in the scene yet. Something was holding her back. He walked over, slow enough that she didn't feel startled when he stopped beside her. "Long day ahead," he said. She gave a small smile. "Yeah, I'm trying to get my head in it." "You will," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "Want to run the lines together?" Her eyes lifted to his, and there was the faintest spark of relief. "Sure." They sat on two folding chairs under a canopy, the rain beginning to tap softly on the fabric above. As they read through the scene, Keanu listened, not just to the words, but to the weight behind them. When she stumbled, he didn't correct her. Instead, he leaned forward and said quietly, "Don't think about the words. Think about why you're saying them." Ana took a breath, nodded, and tried again. This time, her voice carried something raw, something that made him nod slowly. "Better," he said. "That's you, not just the script." She looked at him for a moment, studying him like she was trying to read a language only he knew. "You really pay attention to people, don't you?" He shrugged lightly. "Maybe I just know what it feels like when no one does." The day moved on, and so did the work. The cameras rolled, the director called for retakes, and the crew bustled between shots. Yet every time Keanu passed Ana, there was a brief glance, a quiet check-in that needed no words. It wasn't about protecting her. It was about making sure she knew she wasn't invisible. In the afternoon, during a quick break, Ana was standing near the catering table when a group of visiting producers arrived. They were friendly but distracted, greeting certain cast members with warm handshakes while barely acknowledging others. Ana stood politely, waiting for her turn, but when it came, one of the producers barely looked at her, moving on without even asking her name. Keanu saw it happen. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he walked over, greeting the producers with his usual calm charm. Then, with deliberate ease, he turned to Ana. "Have you met Ana?" he said to them, his voice warm but steady. "She's the heart of this scene we're shooting. None of it works without her." The producers turned back, now giving her their full attention. They shook her hand, asked her about her role, listened as she spoke. Ana handled it gracefully, but she knew exactly what had just happened. Keanu had shifted the light toward her, without making it look forced. When the producers walked away, she looked at him. "You didn't have to do that." He smiled faintly. "I know." It wasn't until hours later, when the day wrapped and the rain had stopped, that Ana truly understood something. Keanu didn't just notice when people were overlooked. He made it his quiet mission to change it in the moment. She wondered what it must be like to carry that kind of awareness all the time. 2 weeks later, the film was halfway through production. The days had blurred together, early mornings, long nights, endless retakes, but there was a rhythm now. Cast and crew moved like parts of the same machine, each person knowing their role. Yet between those moving pieces, Keanu and Ana had carved out something unspoken, a kind of silent understanding. One evening, the set shifted to an outdoor location. The sun was dipping low, bathing everything in gold. The director wanted to capture a key emotional scene in that light, which meant the pressure was high. The crew scrambled to set up before the sun disappeared. Ana's scene was first. She was supposed to deliver a monologue, raw and vulnerable, her character standing at a crossroads. As the cameras rolled, she gave it her all, voice trembling just enough to feel real. But halfway through, a loud clang from the other side of the street broke her focus. The director sighed, calling for a reset. "Let's go again. From the top." Ana nodded, but Keanu, standing off to the side, noticed the way her shoulders tensed. He knew that look. It was the fear of losing the emotional thread before you could grab it again. As the crew prepared, he walked over and spoke quietly, so only she could hear. "Don't think about holding on to it. Just find it again. Sometimes the second take is where the truth really shows." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. When the camera rolled again, she was different. Calmer, more rooted. Her voice cracked at the perfect moment, her eyes carrying the weight of the scene. When the director yelled, "Cut," there was a rare stillness on set, followed by quiet applause from a few crew members. Ana glanced toward Keanu, and he gave her the smallest nod, like saying, "See? I told you." Later that night, after everyone wrapped, a group from the crew invited the cast to a small bar nearby. It wasn't fancy, dim lights, old wooden tables, the smell of coffee and beer in the air, but it was warm. Ana sat at a corner table, talking with a makeup artist when Keanu arrived. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he ordered 2 teas, carried them over, and placed one in front of her. "You don't strike me as the whiskey after work type," he said. She laughed softly. "You'd be right." For a while, they just sat there, sipping tea while the noise of the room hummed around them. Then Keanu leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Do you know why I remember that first group photo so clearly?" he asked. "Because you noticed me? Because I knew what you were feeling before you even felt it. Years ago, I was on a set where someone, an older actor, did that for me. I was about to be forgotten in a moment that mattered, and they pulled me forward. No big speech, no cameras on them. Just, they made sure I was seen. I never forgot that. Ana tilted her head. So you've been carrying it forward? Yeah, he said softly. Kindness isn't something you keep. It's something you pass on. The words stayed with her long after the conversation ended. As the night wound down and people began to leave, a sudden rainstorm swept through the streets. Keanu offered her his jacket without hesitation, even though they were only walking a block to their hotels. When they reached her door, she held it for a moment before giving it back. Thank you, she said, not just for the jacket. He nodded once, the way he always did when he understood without needing more words. The final week of filming arrived faster than anyone expected. The set buzzed with the strange mix of exhaustion and nostalgia that always came when a project was nearing its end. Costumes were being returned, props packed away, and people were already talking about their next jobs. But for Ana, something about this set felt different, less like work, more like a place she would miss. On the second-to-last day, the director announced they would be taking one last full-cast photo to mark the end of the shoot. It was tradition, a way to remember everyone who had been part of the journey. The crew began gathering on the main soundstage, laughter echoing as people hugged, joked, and tried to claim a good spot before the camera was ready. Ana walked toward the group slowly, her heart strangely heavy. She thought about that first photo, the way she had been pushed to the edge, half hidden, until Keanu had stepped in. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been weeks. Now, people called her name as she approached, making space for her without hesitation. But before she could find her place, Keanu appeared beside her. "Ready for your middle spot?" he asked with a faint smile. She laughed. "You really don't let things go, do you?" "Not when they matter," he said simply. This time he didn't have to guide her. She stepped forward on her own. And as the group shifted to fit everyone, Keanu stayed next to her, his presence solid and unshakable. The photographer called out instructions, the crew adjusted their positions, and when the shutter clicked, Ana's smile was bright and unforced. After the photo, there was a small wrap party. Music played, speeches were made, and the director thanked everyone for their work. When it was Keanu's turn to speak, he kept it short. "It's easy to think that the work we do here is just about lights and cameras and scripts," he said. "But the truth is, it's about the people. The way we show up for each other, on screen and off, that's what lasts." His eyes flickered toward Ana just for a second. It was so quick that most people missed it, but she caught it and felt something warm settle in her chest. Later, as the night wound down, they found themselves standing outside together, the cool air carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier. "I wanted to tell you something," Ana said. "That first day when you pulled me into the middle, it didn't just make me feel seen. It made me realize I could take up space without apologizing for it." Keanu smiled softly. "Good. That's the whole point." "And now," she continued, "I think I'll be looking for someone else to pull forward next time." He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Then we're even." They stood there for a moment, the quiet between them comfortable, like a thread connecting two people who understood something deeper than words. The work was done, the lights were going dark, but the lesson, his kindness, would travel far beyond the set. As they said goodbye, there was no need for grand promises. They both knew that in the future, whether together or apart, they'd carry this same quiet rule. Notice the ones on the edge and bring them into the middle.